heard this morning, load shedding is the South African word of the year on this International Dictionary Day. Perhaps no surprise that it's the most used word here when you consider how tough the power cuts have been in 2022. Just when Eskom seems to have stabilized power, then another unit breaks down. It's a difficult situation, but it's a problem really that's been years in the making, a combination of politicians ignoring technical advice, state capture, corruption and ongoing sabotage. But despite this, progress is being made to bring independent power onto the grid. Recently, the power utility announced they would lease parts of their land to independent energy suppliers. And last week, Eskom signed off on some of those agreements. And I'm joined now by Eskom spokesperson, Sikonathi Mantshantsha. Sikonathi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we get to the news about those new deals, I wonder if you could just tell us, and I know it's so hard to predict, but all things being equal, how are our power supplies looking at this point for the rest of the week?
Sadly, we have already told the people of South Africa that stage 2 load shedding will be implemented tonight between 4 p.m. and midnight, and that will indeed be the case until Wednesday, where we will be, as much as possible and to the extent that it's possible, try to limit load shedding to those hours between 4 p.m. and midnight. We'll go on until it's really for the rest of the week, but things do change, and we will give an update on Wednesday. In the unfortunate event that we are forced to, we will of course have to come back and give you an update as soon as anything changes.
Yeah, and it does seem to be an ongoing battle for Eskom. Just as things seem stable, something goes wrong again. Do you think it's the work of sabotage, or is it more about an aging fleet of power stations that you're probably most likely grappling with most of the time?
We can, as Eskom, only make any claim when we have evidence to back it. We have told you, the people of South Africa, that it is the breakdowns which on our 45-year-old power stations. Let's remember, a power station is designed to operate for a period of 50 years. The majority of Eskom's power stations that it is generating from are now 45 years old, and they, as we have said in the past, have not always received the best care possible, and they are now fighting back. So to the extent that we can see and we can communicate that the regular breakdowns that have been occurring on the power stations are as a result of the mechanical problems. Where there is any evidence of any criminality, we will indeed make that announcement as we see it, and of course lay the criminal charges with the relevant law enforcement authorities.
All right. Now tell us a little bit more about the lease deals that was signed off last week. We know that a few months ago, Andre de Ruyter said that Eskom land was going to be leased, and I understand it's in Mpumalanga, quite near the power stations, and that's to bring on board extra capacity. Just explain to us what exactly has been agreed to, and what are the timeframes for the plans?
So this is land that lies inside the power station properties, but that remains unused, which usually would be agricultural land. As you know, power stations are built on what previously were farms in the coal-rich areas. But on the power station properties themselves, there is some land that is always unused because it is not needed for the purposes of generating electricity at that point. The reform that was announced by the government, which permitted investors to build up to 100 megawatts of any electricity facility to generate electricity, have now made this possible. And Eskom has then released about 40,000 hectares of land across its power stations, where there is access to the grid infrastructure, where once the investors start building, will be able to connect and wheel their electricity through to their customers. So this is a transaction that has been agreed at this point only at 2 power stations with 4 companies. I must say these are companies that have participated over the past 10 years of South Africa's IPP program, the Independent Power Producers. They have deals there and are currently supplying in the deals negotiated with the IPP office. They have now come directly to Eskom, where 6,000 hectares in total have been made available at 2 power stations. And as we have said, there will be additional land that is approximately 40,000 hectares. And the beauty about this particular one is that we are looking at a minimum 2,000 megawatts investment capacity or generation capacity that will come out. Mm-hmm. And the people of South Africa and Eskom will not pay a cent, because these will be private investments on land that is leased by Eskom, and there will be no guarantees required from Eskom or National Treasury, but the investors will bring. They have estimated, some of them, 40 billion rand that they will be able to put in, 40 billion rand, and we are using that as a conservative figure of investments that will be unlocked into the energy industry.
And very quickly, how soon, what sort of timeframes are you looking at? Because this sounds like a really workable solution. How quickly do you think we'll see their power coming onto our grid?
It totally is a very workable solution. Sally, I must tell you, unfortunately, this kind of infrastructure does not take 3 months to come into fruition. The reality is, once now that they have signed the agreements, these investors have to then put the funding in place and start building. From that moment where they start building, we expect the power to start flowing in within 24 to 36 months. So we are looking at a good 36 months before we can see this additional capacity coming on stream. It is what Eskom has been able to do within its own scope of influence.
I want to ask you a question, and it's a question about water. And the reason I'm asking you about water, when I know you're the power man, is because of the incredible knock-on effect we have seen with our water supplies here in Gauteng. Now, the obvious question is, our dams are full, why do we battle with water? What we're told is that we don't have enough reservoirs, more reservoirs need to be built, we have maintenance problem, but load shedding is being mentioned as a factor. What I don't understand about that is that we've had load shedding for years and we've never seen such extreme water problems. I wonder if you're able to, first of all, just explain to me how power works around these pump stations. Are they ring-fenced by Eskom? Is there anything Eskom can do to mitigate the impact of load shedding on our water supply?
Sally, one of your last points was we've been having load shedding for years. Let me quantify that. We've been having load shedding for 15 years in this country. And therefore, please direct the question about how this now impacts the provision of water to the relevant authorities. I can answer to what Eskom can do. The load shedding is governed and unfortunately indeed affects everybody in South Africa, very key institutions, including hospitals and indeed all infrastructure. That's the reality that we have, and it is governed by the regulations that govern NERSA, that govern the production of electricity. There is no mechanism under those regulations to actually exempt the water infrastructure or any infrastructure. You have seen over the last few weeks that Eskom, together with the municipalities and the Department of Health, are doing what they can to try and shield hospitals from load shedding. So the municipalities in which these water reservoirs lie, they would have to embark on a similar process in order to isolate supply to the water reservoirs in order to ensure that, or to minimize any disturbances due to electricity. The reality, however, is that they cannot be exempted under current regulations.
I understand. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha. Now, still to come.